this image is very important to try and keep in mind for any movement that you're doing with your client. So center of gravity, how that projects down to the ground. So here's an extreme example of balance, somebody who's standing on a tightrope or a slack line, and you can see that that base of support is really, really small, so she has to make sure that that dot does not sway too much, because if it does, then she's over the edge. You may have heard the phrases static balance and dynamic balance. This is something that is a way to try and discuss the types of balance that's being experienced, as well as how you can then train people. But I challenge you to think about it. What is static and dynamic balance? These concepts are being taught, and actually it is inaccurate, because when you have what's called static balance, that people are referring to when you're standing still. But here's the catch. Nobody is ever standing still. And if you're always moving, as we are, then is it really static? Or is that in fact still dynamic balance? So what are those two definitions? Really, it just means that when you're holding a more static pose, that's what people mean by static. And when you're in a much greater motion with your body, either locomotion or other segments of your body are in motion, then that's viewed as dynamic. I challenge you to see that there is no difference in the control mechanism of these two things. So what is falling down? If we talked about balance and having good balance, the opposite end of the spectrum is actually falling down. And the definition of that is if the projection of your center of gravity extends outside of your base of support, you are now falling down. So you can't maintain that balance. Okay, this is all really important in terms of how you then eventually measure balance. But the falling down, we need to understand why that is so important. And that's because 28% of people who are older do fall down every single year. So if you have 100 clients, 28 of them are going to fall this year. I mean, it's shocking, absolutely shocking. And then of those people who fall, you're going to have a number of them who are going to suffer injuries or possibly even death. Falling down is now the #1 reason for trauma death and trauma injury. That's actually for any age, even more than car crashes. It's a major, major problem, and you're in the perfect position to actually help solve it. So why do we measure balance? Balance is fundamental to every single movement that you do. And as you look through these images, you'll see there's that little dot and the extension of that central gravity down to their base of support. Every possible movement that your body is doing in this world has to keep control of the body relative to this central gravity. You will see that there is a swimmer down at the bottom line there. Gravity is still affecting them, even though they're buoyant, but fortunately that buoyancy means that they're not going to fall down because the buoyancy is keeping them upright, but gravity is still applying on their bodies. So why do we measure balance? Because we want to improve balance, and the better your balance, that means the better coordination you have, the better reaction times, better agility, performance, reduce injuries. All of these things are related to having better balance. Better balance means that your health is going to be better. It means you can perform better. It means you can prevent falls. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you know these things, but we had to just make sure that we covered that part of it, because balance is so essential to every single thing we do as a physical movement. So let's go on to the next poll and let's find out, are any of you currently measuring balance? And if so, what kind of things are you doing? So you'll see that poll has popped up now. And it's not a judgment, so if you're not measuring it, that's totally fine. I'll just give you a few seconds to answer this poll. Getting there. It's looking like quite a lot of you are doing some functional tests, and you're watching your clients as well. All right, we'll give you last 5 seconds. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so excellent. 64% of you actually do a functional test currently. That's great. That means you understand the importance. Another 42% of you are watching your clients. You can learn a lot watching your clients, as you know, and so that's fantastic. Okay, so let's now move on to the next slide, and let's talk about some of these functional tests. A one-leg stand test. You can time somebody to how long can they actually stand on one leg. That's useful in terms of telling you, is there a difference between the two legs? You can do it with your eyes open, you can do it with your eyes closed. That helps you to know, right, how much deficiency is created by removing vision. There's the tandem walk or a tandem stance test. That's where you stand heel to toe on a line, and if it's the walk, you then would take those steps forwards. How many can you do out of 10? Can you do all 10? Can you only do about 5 or so? You can do it forwards and backwards. That's another example of a functional test. And then there's a clinical version of the functional test called the time get up and go. That's where you sit in a chair, you stand up, you walk 10 feet, turn around, come back and sit back down in your chair again, and that is timed. The threshold is 13.5 seconds. That test is thought that if it takes you longer than 13.5, then it means you're more at risk for falling. Less than that, you are at lower risk for falling. So functional tests, these are all useful. They tell you some information. Just like as you're watching your client, you can see, you know, do they have smooth patterns? Are they, do they have a limp? Are they a little bit crooked with their posture? Where are they putting their gaze? So many things that you can gain from watching your client. The functional test has its place, but it is very limited. It is a measure of balance, but what kind of balance is it really testing? So the one leg stand, this would be a typical static balance test in the kind of older definition. And it's really telling you how well can that person stand on one leg? And that's really it. It doesn't extend further than that. So it's quite limited in what it tells you. Walking on one line, same sort of thing. So the tandem walk test is telling you how well does this person walk on a line. Now, I mentioned that the time get up and go test has some implications for fall risk. It's a very poor predictor though. It only captures 30% of people who will indeed fall in the future. So it's a low predictor. It tells you some things in terms of gait, speed of gait, which may have value to you as an assessor. Now, one of the things that we have discovered is by testing astronauts for decades, and we invented a particular algorithm for astronauts on the moon to go into their moon boots. So this is really cutting edge science to try and predict not only how well are you balancing, but what does that mean in terms of falling down? So it's a meaningful measure of balance. And the final form factor is a scale. So you stand on this scale and it gives you this assessment. And the scale is called the Zebrio Pro. So this is now a better way to actually measure balance, mainly because it can predict falls and therefore it is a meaningful measure of balance. But this will make sense based on what we talked about in terms of the definition of balance and how the body controls itself. So if you look at image A, somebody standing on the scale, just as you would with your eyes open. Image B is showing you that we never stand still. There's always going to be movements. Now, if you look at C, this is a trace of dots. If you imagine that center of gravity position projected down onto the floor, that's what these dots are showing you. And it's showing you that over time, there was some very small movements for this particular person. Now we can look at this sway pattern, it's known as a stabilogram, and we can then put different assessments, algorithmic equations onto it to try and then work out what does this mean. And we can identify patterns of stability and instability. This means that within that little sway pattern of dots, we can see where is the micro failure occurring? When is the body actually failing to control itself? And it happens a lot more frequently than you think. It might happen, 5 times, even for yourself, across 60 seconds. So we make it simple, of course. So you stand on the scale. We've got this very sophisticated technology, the Brio core technology invented at NASA, and we simplify it into an easy to understand score, 1 to 10. 10 is the best, Simone Biles on a good day. Really hard to get. Then we have 1, 2, or 3. If you score that, you're actually at high risk for falling. That means that we're predicting that you have a high probability of falling in the next 12 months. If you're 4, 5, 6, that's a moderate risk, but we really want to keep an eye on those high risk people. So from there, let's give you a demo. Let's show you what this is all about. So I'm just going to stop the share here. So you should hopefully see. Okay. So I don't know if you can all see that, that frame in a large manner.
We can see basically down to Andrea's knee. We can't, okay.
That's right, so here we go.
That's perfect, great.
All right. So now Andrea has plugged in this scale. The professional scale has that capability. And you may have heard those beeps. It counted her down. It does measure your weight. That was the very first number that, that appeared. She's going to stand there for 60 seconds with her arms by her side, her eyes forwards, trying to stand as still as she possibly can. And while we have another 30 seconds for her to go through the test, I encourage everybody to stand up at home, try and stand just like Andrea with your arms by your side, your eyes forwards, and see if you can stand completely still. And you might start to feel a slight movement. Again, everybody is always moving, and this scale is measuring that. So we have another 10 seconds to go. So it's just a 60-second test, but it can feel like the longest minute of your life sometimes. And once it finishes, we get the beeps again, and the score is divided, and she got a 7. So well done, Andrea. All that exercise is paying off.
And it really is as simple as that. And the beauty of using something like this on a fairly regular basis, the first time gives you that nice base. Where am I today? And then as you go through the training or adapting training, you can then see what effect that's having. Conversely, you can find after lockdown with maybe not the same access to gym equipment, not the same motivation to get out there and work, you can also see very quickly within even a week what that's doing to your balance score.
So from there, we're going to talk you through some stories from people who have actually measured themselves over years even. So we'll just pull it up. This is Judy's story. So in this particular story, Judy is 85, and when she first started measuring herself on the far left side, you can see she was in the red. She was scoring low. She was high risk for falling. She did fall. Fortunately, she didn't break anything. She was prescribed physical therapy, and sure enough, her score went up. Her score went up. She actually then had access to balance classes. This was in her senior living facility. So she was very committed to her exercise and her balance classes. She was doing it every single day. And what a great result that she had, that she kept herself up high. But then what happened around the holiday time is the senior living facility cancels all classes for a month. It's a terrible idea. I'm sure there's people absolutely screaming at the moment at home hearing that. And her score went down, and she's now back into that high risk range. When she started her classes again, her score went up, but she knew, because she'd seen that low point, she didn't want to be there, and she was perhaps even more committed. And you can see that her score really elevated nicely, even getting into the green for many days. The same thing happened the following year. All it took was one test and she knew what to do and was able to bring herself up. So Judy is a fantastic example of being able to measure your balance, a meaningful measure of balance that is linked up to predicting whether you're going to fall down, how that can then really motivate people to be better. So we have a free app called Zero Balance Coach. And this allows Judy, she can track herself, your clients can track themselves, you can track yourself as well. And it gives you a chance to track what's going on with your balance over time, and then you can explore why. So that wheel on the far right with the balance profile, these are the 6 pillars of balance, because there are many things that influence your balance and your client's balance. And when you score low, you want to understand why. So the 6 pillars of balance, there they are. With respect to Judy, she did more strength training. Strength is a very important piece for improving your balance and preventing falls. So for Judy, she actually did more exercise, she did more strength work, particularly of those quadriceps muscles, and sure enough, her score improved. So from Judy's story, we can now learn that getting those baselines, just like Andrea had mentioned, you get a baseline, you see where you are, you can see that when you do something, does it change your score? Does it improve your situation and reduce your risk? So tracking the change is also important. And it was motivating for Judy because she saw it go down and she knew then what to do. And she went in gung-ho to do her exercise, and it kept her going because she was seeing the benefits as her score went up. So here's another story. This one is Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth also started lower. I believe Elizabeth was 82. So she started low. She was in the high risk range again. And she also started doing balance classes and Tai Chi. Very dedicated to her exercise, she started to see her score go up. Here's the trend. So you can see that she improved over time by doing that exercise. Fantastic. That's exactly what we want. Unfortunately, Elizabeth had some health issues, and those health issues really affected her balance, and we picked up on that as time went on. She did in fact have surgery, and you can see now where we had that positive trend, now we had this negative trend. We got to the point of surgery. You would hope that that would lead to things being better and she can get back on track. Unfortunately, this particular person with Elizabeth, she had quite a turbulent time afterwards. Her sleep was really affected, and what she then learned is that actually, even though she's getting this really bad sleep, when she consciously made an effort to rest more, those were the days that she scored better. So she did it more, which is really fantastic to see. Sometimes there's things that are out of your control, like medical conditions. For her, you know, she needed the surgery. Surgery in of itself creates all sorts of different problems for balance, medications being one of them. And then it was the other piece, something that she could do something about, which was the bad sleep. One bad night of sleep can drop your score up to 40%. So sleep or bad sleep is very noxious to your balance. And so you need to try and understand at what point is it really affecting me? And if you measure your balance, you can then learn these things. So from Elizabeth's story, what can we say? When we measure our balance, you can get the trends. You can get alerts that something's not going right. You know, I need to take action. As you saw that dip in her balance, it was on par with her health dipping as well. And then she got these personal insights of what can I do? What can I do to be better? So it's very empowering and very motivating to be able to measure people's balance. Now I'm going to let Andrea talk you through Ellen's story. Ellen is a personal trainer herself, and so let's hear all about Ellen's experience of measuring her balance.
Sure. So Ellen's, as Katie said, a personal trainer. She's also a runner. She's run a number of marathons. She's in her 60s, very fit lady. But as you can see at the beginning here, she scored low. She scored in the high risk zone. And this was a real shock for her. And as we got chatting and dug back into those 6 pillars of balance, she realized that while she's been training other people, she hadn't actually been doing that much exercise for herself. When she wasn't in training for an event, she realized that she'd actually lost quite a lot of strength in her legs, her quadriceps. And so that first initial score prompted her to address that. And you can see immediately there's a positive effect. The second plateau that you can see in the middle there was she'd got a certain amount, but she was frustrated. Why is she only a 7? She's a personal trainer. She wanted to do better than that. She went to see her chiropractor, which is something she does from time to time. Turns out this was the right thing to do, because after a 1-day little dip, her body then bounced straight back up into that, then up to that 8. And so she really learned there that it gave her the power to give that real time. And these score changes are over the course of a week. And so you can see when you have this measurement and you can make that change, the change can reflect quite quickly in the balanced score that you're seeing.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because it's more of a neural adjustment. You don't have to wait, all the time for the muscle to be built for this particular situation. She had some strength, but she really needed a neural adjustment to really activate those pathways. And so, you've got short-term benefits and long-term benefits with your training, and balance is one of those things that, if you've been creating a strength base, maybe it's slightly dumb strength, like if you do weight machines, that's great because it's a safer environment, but it might be more dumb strength. And then you can do some more balance work to make that strength smarter, because you're now really working those neural pathways through to it. So this story, I think, is really helpful in not just showing somebody who is, it wasn't because she didn't care about her physical health. She was a trainer and she was really committed to her own personal health. But even people like that, ourselves included, we notice that we get to dips, and it's really useful to know when. So for Ellen, she learned about her own self-care through having this chance to measure her imbalance. She got an alert about herself and she got a personal insight. It's a wonderful tool to be able to do that. You then have the power to learn, which of your strategies are really helping your clients, which maybe it's a particular exercise helps one client in one way, and maybe a different exercise is important for another client. And you can learn these things because you can measure it. So I think what we would love is for everybody to become a balance hero. Balance is something that isn't really understood in the general population. And for you to become a balance hero, we believe there's 2 different parts that can really help you to be that. The first is to be able to see into the future with your measurement. And the second is to have that superhero knowledge base. So seeing in the future, what do we mean by that? Well, if you think back to that image before of being blindfolded, if you can't see what's going to happen, then it's hard for you to then actually take action. So for you to be a hero and help your clients, you need to know what's coming so that you can prevent it and prepare them accordingly so that they get a different trajectory. And to do that, the ZBRO Pro Smart Scale is a professional scale. It does cost $399 and it measures your weight, balance. It can identify fall risk. It has unlimited users, a warranty to it if you select that, and it's also can plug in with the power. It's won awards. It's a certified space technology, meaning it's coming from space to your gyms. And so this tool is something that really can turn you into a balance hero because it gives you that chance to see into the future. And then the other part that allows you to be a balance hero is that if you can get this superhero knowledge about balance science and the 5 steps to create a balance training program. We have an online course. A number of you may have taken it already. If so, I hope you enjoyed it. Your comments certainly suggested that you did. It takes you through the science of balance so you understand the fundamentals even more than I've explained today, and then talks you through the risks of the other side of having poor balance and what your clients may be facing. And then the 3rd unit is guiding you through, and it gives you these fundamental pieces about how do you even structure a balanced program so that it is personalized and it does truly generate the result that you want to get. And we do it through a number of different challenge layers, just to give you a little bit of a teaser there. Now, you can get CECs with this course, and you know, it gets you on the map. If you take the Balance Specialist online course, it means that you get added to that Balance Specialist course so that we can then refer clients to you. If anybody who's looking for a balance specialist, they can find one in their area, and that very well could be you. So that's a way to get yourself on the map too. So we want to make sure that all of you who are attending the summit here today, that you have an opportunity to get these tools at a discount. And so we're offering 10% off the scale and 35% off the online course. And Andrea, do you want to mention that in terms of the code?
Sure. So the code is quite simple, FAS20. And if you enter the vendor area within the Functional Aging Summit, click on the Zebrio link, that will take you straight through to the page from which you can then bounce course or Zebrio Pro. Just take a note of that code. You'll need to put it in at checkout.
Excellent. Well, so the last slide that I want to talk about before we get to some questions, because I know that the Q&A is usually the most fun part of it. Just want to remind you back to where we were at the very beginning, which is that balance is this missing piece of trying to understand the body and how to make it better. And there is a quote on this slide from a very well-known trauma surgeon, Dr. John Holcomb, and he said, seniors need Zebrio. It will save their life. If you can identify who's at risk, if you can help improve their balance, you can prevent falls. So you become the balance hero to really help your clients and potentially even save their life. So with that, let's open up some questions.
Fantastic. Great work, Katharine and Andrea. Dr. Katharine, thank you very much. We do have some questions in the chat. A couple of them relate to one another. I've got one from both Irv and also Jason. Irv asks, why are there so many spikes in the day-to-day balance assessments? And also Jason asks, does time of day, hydration, etc., impact the results?
Yeah, balance it's like a holistic representation of your health. There's so many things that can affect your balance. Sleep, hydration, just like you said, time of day, even if you're just mentally distracted or if your mood is a little bit depressed, all these things that we know that can change throughout a day, change day to day, they are in fact changing how well you're controlling your balance. So those spikes and the variability that you see is actually what's going on with your body. And so this is where it's such a useful thing to be able to measure it. Otherwise you are just flying blind. You don't know, is that hydration status, does it actually affect me? You might actually be more resistant to that with your balance system. You don't really know. When you take maybe you've got a client who's just started a new blood pressure medication, that can actually take 2 weeks to get used to with respect to balance. So your balance can be off for 2 weeks while someone's changing a blood pressure medication. So yes, it does vary. And it's wonderful to be able to see how it does vary, and it empowers you and your clients to then take action.
So can I just hop in there quickly? And that is that in the same way that I'm sure if you we know when you're tracking weight, whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight, you know that you try to do it at a similar time of day under similar circumstances so that you can have a ready comparison. And the same is true for balance. We know that when you're fatigued, it's going to be down. If you're wanting to compare your track and see what your normal fluctuation pattern is, then you would try to do it at a consistent time of day or a consistent time of the week.
Fantastic, great information. Kathy has a question about the usage of the Zibrio scale. Does it need to be on a floor, or could it work glued down on a glued down carpet or concrete? What sort of surface does it need to rest on to get the most accurate results?
Excellent question, Kathy. Yes, carpet and scales do not mix. You don't want anything that might compress underneath any kind of scale, weighing or balance. So concrete floor, anything that's flat, tile, concrete floor, those are the best surfaces. Wood is fine too, just nothing that can compress.
Gotcha. Yeah. The instrumentation is very sensitive, right? So if there's any sort of compliance on the surface it's on, it's going to possibly create some false positives and things of that nature, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so where we've had physical therapists who use our scales and they've only got carpet in their clinic, they've actually managed to get themselves a metal plate that they would put the scale on top of. So that,
like a super heavy base plate. Right. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Let's see. Just as a little housekeeping item for the two of you, apparently the code doesn't work. The FAS 20 code is not working. There have been some people who are heading right over, hopping on the cart, but the code is somehow not working. So you might want to check on that.
Okay, absolutely.
Let's see. Question from Sieran Cribs. Training on very unstable equipment such as the BOSU, is that effective or not? Is it too much of a stimulus? Is it not practical as we generally are on solid ground? What would you say about doing kind of some unstable training for balance?
Excellent question. Yeah, it's and this is what the course actually goes through, because the course explains all the different sensory inputs to balance, and therefore that's how you can then define what program you want to apply. And so with the BOSU versus solid ground, it means that you're changing which inputs your body is going to be controlling itself on. So I can't really do justice to it in a two-sentence answer, but I can tell you that question is absolutely covered in the course. If anything else, that is the main essence of the course.
Gotcha. Okay, another question. Do you have any comments about taking multiple measurements per day to look at kind of a diurnal trend? And if you have, sort of what diurnal trends do you tend to see?
Yeah, it all depends on what your goals are. You know, I liken it to just a regular weighing scale. You know, some people, they measure themselves once every 6 months and like, I'm fine, I know where I am, just want to get a ballpark. And whereas other people, they measure themselves multiple times in a day. And so it really depends on what the balance health goals are for your client, or that you have for your client. You know, sometimes it may be a weekly check-in just to see, all right, what's the bigger picture? How is my multi-week program affecting the clients? Is it improving them or not? If you're really worried about full risk and you want to know throughout the day, when are the changes occurring? For instance, if you have somebody with Parkinson's, they change quite dramatically throughout the day. Particularly to do with when they actually take their medications. And so for you as a professional and trying to help your client, the information that you extract from that client will greatly depend on the goals that you have for them. Gotcha.
Dr. Katie, I've got a question specifically about an acute training session. So, you know, do you think it's valuable, and is it likely there would be a positive result if you were to do an assessment at the start before you started your training session, and then you go through a full training session maybe it creates some peripheral fatigue. Maybe it creates, they're being challenged to maybe a multimodal training session, and then testing afterwards. What's your thoughts there, and what have you seen from pre to post acute bout training effects with Ziggy?
Yeah, so fatigue, you've got acute fatigue and systemic fatigue, and when you have the acute, which part of the body is being fatigued? We see that when the exercise is related to the legs, that is very affecting to your balance. So for example, someone who does a spin class, we've seen that the score has dropped 1 to 3 points pre to post. Now, how long does it take for them to recover to get back to their baseline of before doing that spin class? We're actually doing that study right now at the University of Houston. That's an example of acute fatigue. And that's really important because you may have a client that when they fatigue themselves, those jelly legs, it's a real thing. And it's real with respect to balance. And you don't want to send them out the door in a vulnerable state. You don't want them to be going out and then falling, in the car park. So, this helps you to then make a decision like, okay, I want to do those hard legs, but then, maybe I'll do some abs afterwards to kind of let the legs chill out a bit. Maybe I like to do stretching at the end, but you now know that actually delaying the time that they actually leave your facility after having done some very hard legs may be beneficial for them. That's something for you to determine after you see that. But then if that's very acute, then you have to think about the systemic fatigue. If somebody has done a marathon a few days prior, they're going to have systemic fatigue. And is that going to affect their balance? It absolutely will. And so again, this is a tool for you as a fitness professional to test, to learn, and to experiment with, so that you can say to your client, I'm seeing it dipping down, let's do something about it. Or you've told me that that you're working out 2 times a day, every single day, and I'm seeing that ever since you started that, you've been bottoming out. Your balance is a bit low. Why don't we take a day off? Let's see what recovery does for you. And you might see it go up, you may not. But it gives you a tool to really explore whatever is going on with that person. How is it affecting their balance so that you can really guide them forwards? And I did see a question pop up. So I'm going to just jump in on this one, Chris, because I saw someone say, can I wear shoes? And you absolutely can. The scale is measuring you in whatever state you're in. Whether it's a fatigue state, mentally distracted state, an emotional state, whatever state you're in on the scale, that's what we're measuring, because this scale is completely agnostic to your age, your gender, your anything else except for that physical capability to actually control itself. So even if you want to wear high heels to a wedding, pop your heels on, stand on the scale, see how you do with heels on. It's in some ways it's really fun to test things out. If you're going to go hiking, try a backpack on, see how that changes things. Again, it just measures you in the state that you are on the scale.
Fantastic. Syrian Cribs also asks, it only measures static balance, transfer to dynamic stability. And you touched on that at the start. Could you just touch on that again a little bit?
Yeah, so our body is always moving. It's never static. And what the scale is actually measuring is how well you're controlling itself. So when you're measuring the control piece, that applies to everything, not just a 1-leg stand, not just a standing 2-leg stance. This is now a very meaningful, generalizable measurement of balance. And that is why we can predict whether somebody's going to fall down in the next 12 months and give a 30+ year risk trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So the normative values that have been developed to create the scale are based on the eyes open 60-second condition, correct?
That's right.
Is there any data, are there data on eyes closed conditions, other conditions as well?
I mean, we have it. We don't need it because it doesn't tell us anything more. If we can already identify who's at risk for falling by standing with your eyes open, the control mechanism hasn't changed when you close your eyes. It's still the same control mechanism, but previously we have to close the eyes, stand on one leg to expose the weakness, but we're already measuring the weakness. This is like that X-ray vision to be able to see things that you couldn't see before.
Gotcha. How much impact have you observed between barefoot and shoes, perhaps on the same person?
Yeah, not a lot of difference. It sort of depends on the types of shoes they're wearing. You know, if it's a very compliant shoe, so it's got a very squishy bottom, that's not really great. But yeah, so it comes down to what kind of footwear do you train in, because that's how the body is adapting to be able to control itself. So if you find that somebody scores really well with their shoes on, but very poorly without shoes, well, maybe they need to do some more training without shoes on. If it's the other way around, then, you know, if they want to, maybe they train in flat shoes all the time, but they want to go dancing in heels, they never wear heels, you might see that they're actually more wobbly, and that's something to talk about. Not that I think they should be lifting weights in heels or anything like that.
That would be an interesting look in the gym, no question about that. Let's see. How do you work with people who have inner ear issues, and, you know, with that sensory system being impaired and also affecting other sensory systems? Would you advise that somebody with vestibular impairment does eyes open, eyes closed training? What sorts of, that's what Blake was asking.
Yeah, so again, you've got multiple inputs, sensory inputs to control your balance. And your body reweights those inputs depending on the context. For inner ear issues and vestibular problems, if you've got a faulty sense, so if that input coming in isn't very good, then your body reweights itself to the other senses anyway. And so for this as a tool, you're measuring to see what is the complete composite control capability of the body. And if you know that that particular person has a vestibular issue, then yes, you can then start to structure your balance training program, knowing that you want to try and boost up that particular sense for movements, but then you can measure to see if it's in fact working. So this is covered more in the online course, because you have to understand all of the science behind the sensory inputs to then know how to design a program based on the variabilities for each of your clients.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mentioning the online course there, thank you for that note. The code is now working.
Correct. The code is working for the online course. FAS 20, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, fantastic. Got a lot of people very interested in using the scale. Sounds like people are either have it on order or are ordering it currently. Could you tell us just a little bit about the development of the scale? Was it validated on a force platform? How did you guys go through the actual iterative development of the scale and the algorithm as well?
Yeah, well, the algorithm itself, as I mentioned, you know, we're at NASA, and we use the big Neurocom, if anyone's familiar with that, yeah. $70,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah. Massive.
It's massive. Can't predict falls though.
Right.
And so we've constantly tried to understand balance control and be able to quantify it. That's been going on at NASA for decades. I was one of the co-inventors of that algorithm, and so once you have the algorithm within that context, which, you know, they're just force plates in the end. So you've got this clinical grade force plate that you can run your algorithm on. That's fantastic. We then further validate it. We used over 2,000 trials to actually define that algorithm, with many different situations, from astronauts who had returned to Earth in very poor shape, to older adults, to people with different sensory deficiencies, vestibular blindness as well. So across the board, we could then get a really good picture to know if this algorithm is working. From that, we validated it with older adults here on Earth, ran a number of different studies, and at the same time, moving it through to sensors that can actually detect the forces at the same level of clinical force plates. And so this is how we're able to get the price down to $399, is because we've done so much work on the algorithm that we can actually say that that movement of the center of gravity projected down to the ground, we can detect that, as well as a clinical grade force plate that costs $70,000. And that's published in the Journal of Biomechanics. So that's the hardware piece. The software all comes with it, of course, and we validate the entire thing to be able to predict falls with clinical trials. We've had 2 longitudinal studies for over 12 months. The most recent clinical trial had 412 people, sorry about that, and across 15 different contexts with 8 senior living facilities, 2 outpatient clinics, 2 PT clinics, and a hospital. So a lot of science over 13 years to get us to this point. It's cutting edge science.
Excellent, fantastic. Could you tell us a bit about the similarities and balance between astronauts returning from space and older adults?
Yeah, when you go to space, you're floating around, there's no gravity vector. And so anytime you move your head, which normally on Earth, that tells you where your head position is. But when you move your head, you now have to learn where your head is in space without this gravity vector. So you have structures in your ear called the otoliths, which tell you gravity. So every head movement is relative to gravity. Remove that, you now have to adjust to, okay, so this is where my head is relative to my hand, relative to my International Space Station. You come back down to Earth, you're now maladapted to Earth because now the gravity vector's back, and your otolith said, yeah, but I thought you said it wasn't there. Now it's back. So every time they move their head back down to Earth, they think they're moving forwards. And so they fall over. So that is one example. It's an adaptation, a sensory adaptation. It's very specific. It's not identical to aging. However, there is a lot that we can learn from that particular scenario. When humans are on Earth, and as we go through our decades, you often don't exercise quite as much as you get older and older. If you are sitting in a chair, your body is adapting to sitting in a chair. And the signals coming through aren't as accurate. So just like with space flight, when you come back to Earth, the astronaut's signal from the vestibular system is now a less accurate signal. It's an inaccurate signal. If we're here on Earth and we're not doing enough to keep our signals sharp and at their best, it becomes less accurate. So that's the similarity. Signals coming in to control your body. We are machines in that respect, and how we control ourselves is how we keep ourselves upright and performing well.
Very good, very good. Does anybody have any more questions? If somebody wants to make a comment or a question, you can unmute yourself. We've kind of gone through all the questions on the chat. So feel free to unmute yourselves if you have another question for Dr. Forth, or put it in the chat as well.
Dr. Forth, I've heard that standing up from sitting fairly frequently, and it's from a lady that worked at NASA. If you do it every 30 minutes or so, it resets your vestibular system. I was telling people that, and do you agree with that hypothesis?
Standing up every 30 seconds reset.
No, I'm sorry, I meant 30 minutes or so.
Right. Standing up every 30 minutes resets your vestibular system.
I don't know, does it? Do you know?
That sounds like a catchy phrase. I don't know that is exactly precise. However, what they're trying to get at there is if you don't stimulate your systems, then they start to kind of atrophy. And so you want to keep these pathways open. You want to keep them excited. When you think about drinking caffeine, caffeine excites your neurons. That's sensory to motor neurons too. And so, you know, when you feel like you're ready and everything's primed to have great movement, I think that's probably what they're getting at, is that if you're stimulating it, then you're going to excite the system so that it's more likely to respond well. I think that's probably what it is. The other issue, which I thought you were going to go towards, is syncope, the fainting, that if you stand up quickly, that you don't have enough blood to your head. And
I have that now recently, so I'm all ears.
Yeah, so with syncope, this is something that is unrelated to the control mechanism of balance and is very much related to your cardiovascular system. And so if you sit still for too long, then your blood is pooling in your legs. And if you stand up quickly, then there's not all the blood's down at the bottom, not at the top. So you're more likely to faint at that point. So if you are standing and certainly walking regularly, you know, every 30 minutes, that's actually keeping the blood flowing around. So you're less likely to have that kind of an event.
Now, this might be a little bit far out, but Deepak Chopra, most people have heard of, meditation was demonstrating that if you put your attention, say, in your hands or something, you get more blood to the hands, okay? So that's what he said. So I was wondering if you put more attention before you're about to stand to your heart, possibly, maybe it helps the blood flow there. I don't know, but.
Well, yeah, well, actually, so before you engage in an activity, your blood pressure actually suddenly, it goes up quickly right before you do a piece of activity. So the mind-body connection is most definitely a strong thing. You, the anticipatory part of the body can be somewhat overridden by the conscious thought. And so you're going into a really fascinating side. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but you have to think that your body has its automatic controls, and then it has some conscious controls too. This is one of the reasons why our test is actually 60 seconds, because you actually see that for the first 30 seconds, people can override it. We call it descending command. You can say, I will stand still, I will not move, and you can force it. And then after about 30 seconds, even though you still have the same desire, it's almost like your body suddenly releases it. It will not override it anymore because you kind of flipped into this more automatic phase of things. So yeah, the balance between, for human beings, where we've got the sort of subconscious control mechanisms of, you know, all of our physiological systems, and then you've got this descending command, this overriding commands that you can take over your body, and sometimes it's for the better, and sometimes it's not.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
We have another question in the chat, Katharine. What is the main way blind people compensate for their loss of vision in relation to balance?
Yeah, so if you have a particular sense that is not functioning well, so vision is a very clean-cut binary situation. You either have it or you don't. Somebody who is blind, they can then rely on the other senses. So you've got your vestibular sense and your proprioception and vision. You need two of those three to be able to balance well. So if you take out the vision, you're totally fine. You've still got vestibular and the proprioception to rely upon. Then you have to think, what point did this person go blind? Have they been blind from birth? Because if that's the case, their other senses are very, very well developed. Their sensory cortex is very well developed to take in that information and interpret it. If, however, somebody has lost their sight very late in life, their sensory cortex won't be it would have been developed in a slightly different manner. And so it's going to be a lot harder for you if you lose your sight later, having already developed yourself on that sense. So of course you can still adapt, but the area of greatest adaptation is of course through childhood.
Great. It's like taking up a sport later in life when, you know, a lot of motor pathways have already been developed, and it's tough to introduce new motor patterns, especially if they conflict with something that you'd been doing prior as well.
Yes.
I blame my golf game on that. It's the only explanation I've got. Ellen has a question of whether taking the course, does that work well even in, at least at this time, not purchasing the scale?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It guides you through there. You can have them separately. You can have them together. You know, we want to help you, give you the tools so that you can help your clients best. Learn the information, structure your programs. If at some point in the future you want to actually measure people, then fantastic. If not, that's fine too. But yeah, we would love for you to become a superhero, get that superhero knowledge.
I think it's great too that your pillars, your 6 pillars, include all of those other things that also affect balance, that trainers, fitness professionals should be talking to their clients about. Maybe outside their scope of practice to specifically discuss medications and interactions, but at least having the client become aware of a talking point that they should have with one of their other people in their care team. So it's really, really, I think, helpful to know that exercise, no question, is probably the most important component to reduce fall risk, but so many other things interact as well that need to be addressed. So I think it's really cool that your education course provides that full kind of holistic view at the different elements that do really affect balance for older adults on a daily basis. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, and we've still got several minutes. It's like the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, hey, let's everybody put something in the chat. Let's thank Dr. Katharine and Andrea for the time today. And we'll sign off in about 10 seconds. So chat it up. We get some thank yous coming in. Thank you so much to both of you. We get a hand clap, and we're certainly happy to have you as sponsors. Thank you very much for sponsoring the Functional Aging Summit. And we'll continue to see you throughout the week, throughout the conference.
Fantastic. Yeah. And, you know, thank you all to all of you trainers, because, you know, it really does take all of you to actually make a difference in this world, to help people. And we'd love to get you on our map so that we can then send clients your way, because the more people know about balance, that's how we're going to truly save the world from falling down.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to the two of you.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.